Hello, Brain Power TV family. It's me, Dr. Echo, here with another episode of Brain Power TV. And I have with us today the amazing Dr. Kami Anderson. I love talking to this lady. She's amazing. So she's an educator, she is a linguist, she's just amazing. So, Dr. Kami, can you please tell us more about how you got to be doing this amazing work that you are with parents and their kids?
Oh, absolutely. So, well, firstly, I'm a mom of four. So that's what started it. My whole business started because of my kids. So I've got four amazing kids. They're 12, 10, and I have 8-year-old twins. And I was with my oldest son because I raised all of my kids. And in talking with him one day, he said he didn't want to learn Spanish anymore. And my heart was like, what do you mean? What do you mean you don't want to learn anymore? But part of the reason why was because he was at a dual language school. It was predominantly Black, but everybody was learning and he already knew. So because of that, he didn't have anybody to talk to. They kind of isolate him a little bit because the teachers kind of gave him these different types of privileges. So he felt alone. So I said, I'm going to create a tribe for you then. And I'm going to create a group of just other families that are doing the same thing that we're doing in order to make sure that you get what you need to get. And that's really how everything got started, where I just work with parents and say, hey, let's introduce language and this is what it's going to look like.
Yeah, woo, I love it. See, mommy's creating solutions. That's right. So, tell us why language is important for the brain.
So there are ways in which there's research that talks about how interpreters, like when they're going through and they're studying dementia patients later on in life, and one of the things that they discovered was in terms of occupation, interpreters, language interpreters, there were very few language interpreters that were a part of it. So delving into it a little bit more, they're realizing that it's because there's aspects of our brain that we're using, that we're forced to use on a regular basis with just the language ability, that makes it really hard for us to kind of fall into some of those common traps that happen with Alzheimer's and dementia. Right. So that got me to thinking, okay, well, what exactly goes on when we're learning languages? And, like our brain has all these different grooves. Now, I'm not a neuroscientist, okay? So let me just preface that there. We have all these different grooves in our brain. And the more we start working in another language, the groove for language gets deeper and deeper and deeper. So we're like creating these crevices in a brain that can hold and retain all the language that we learn. And that's something that not a lot of people do on a regular basis. They're not finding the ways to create new grooves. They're just, my brain is my brain and I'm just going to keep on going. And we don't really realize the impact that it actually has on our brains while we're moving. Yeah. That's how I said, we're working on a new groove, guys. We're working on a new groove. So come on, let's learn these words. Let's get this together. We're working on a new groove for language. That's what I tell my clients all the time.
I love it. And it's true because we don't talk a lot about the why. I think if we start from the why, right? And things become clear to the parents, like, why is this important? It's not just because, you want your kid to learn another language, because it is critical for your kids' brain growth, like that your child is able to use more of their brain space, right? And we really don't use a lot of our brains. Our brains are amazing,
and in terms of us being able to retain stuff in our brains, when we see folks that look like us doing it, that compels us to want to store it for longer. So if when Black children see Black adults speaking in a different language, they are now compelled to want to hold on to the language, because in their mind, in their child minds, they're telling themselves, this is what I'm supposed to do when I get older. So they hold on to it in long-term memory, so that they can be able to recall it. So all of that stuff kind of works with the brain, like the ways in which we model it at home helps with their brain development. The ways in which we use it helps it. All of it works. So just be a parent in language and you're doing a whole lot of work for your child's brain.
Mm-hmm. And for the parents' brain, tell them.
Yes, well, of course, the parents' brain too. Because we have there's this myth that, once we get to be a certain age, I'm too old to learn language.
No way, that's not
No.
true.
If you can teach yourself how to jet ski, you can teach yourself a new language. And for Black people in particular, like it's part of our ancestral memory. When you have all this like DNA that kind of links us back to things. And if we're thinking about the continent of Africa with all of those countries, it's not just 54 languages, it's thousands of ethnic groups, right? There's no way.
Languages. Yep.
There's no way that they were all speaking to themselves. Like, okay, so the Yoruba are going to speak to the Yoruba, and the Hausa are going to only speak to the Hausa. No, they were moving around, so they had to know these languages. So we've always been multilingual. So it's really just a matter of reminding ourselves about that part of our connection to even the continent and continental memory. A lot of, especially with Black Americans, we think our history starts, or we don't really know how to tap into the history that starts before the Ma'afa, right? Before the slave trade. But being able to, hey, but this is one thing that we had. And that's why you say, oh, language comes easy to me. That would be why. Oh, I know how to wordsmith. That would be why. So really being able to make those connections.
Right. Oh, I love it. Love it. So now you told us why we need to learn a language. How are we going to do that? Because that's the next question. Like, I don't have time. It's too much work, too much stuff. So tell us.
Well, part of it is we have this trauma of the foreign language classroom, right? Everybody, when we think about learning another language, we go back to our last instance with language, which is we were sitting at the desk and our teacher was making us run verb drills and they were making us do conjugation and we were trying to match the adjectives to the nouns and we're thinking about the schoolwork part of it. And that traumatizes us. And it's like, oh no, I don't have time for any of that because that just, And when really, all we have to do is just think about the places where we can introduce language and stuff that we're already doing. So some of the things that I tell my parents, like this is a really quick nugget for you that's listening. If you know how to count to 10 in Spanish, the next time you give your child snack like crackers or cookies, count them in Spanish. Oh, you're going up the steps. You're walking up the steps. Count the steps as you're going up the steps. These are little ways in which your child will stop and pause. It causes your brain to do something differently. It also causes their brain to do something different because now they're looking at you like, why are you talking like that? What is that? And they're trying to figure out, do I need to store this for another time? Is this just happenstance? And the more often you do it, then the brain says, oh, I've got to keep this because every time we go up these steps, they're counting in this language. Okay. And then they start to hold on to the numbers. Right. That's how I introduced it to my babies. Like as they were learning how to walk, as they started going up the steps, I would just count uno, dos, tres, and then you would hear them. I'd be sitting on the couch and they're going up the steps and you can hear them going uno, dos, tres, as they're going up the steps by themselves. So it is all that repetition of just really simple, mundane daily tasks can do wonders for how you're able to introduce language. And it doesn't take you sitting in front of a textbook to do it. Like the textbook stuff, that's why I'm here. I give you the textbook stuff and I give it to you as you need it. Not necessarily, I need you to do pages 15 through 35 and answer all of these questions. No, because that's not functional for you.
I love it. Functional language.
Right, exactly.
Right. So wait, something you said about getting the kids. So okay, yeah, I know what it is. That myth that the kids cannot learn more than one language at the same time. Can you please tell them?
Yes. I need to dispel this myth because this happens even with like bilingual families. Like there are families that are multilingual and they're like, oh, my child is getting language confusion because they're doing this. So I'm just going to break down what's actually happening, right? Okay, so we have these toddlers. They're between the ages of 4. I'll say 2 and 4. And they are getting inundated with all of these new words and sounds. And what they're trying to do is process all of those words and sounds. So they're understanding that this is the word for cup, and cup is this little tubular thing that mom always gives me that has juice in it. Cup. Okay, great. Dad calls it taza, but it's still the little tubular thing that he has juice in it. So cup, taza, those are 2 ways to say the same thing. Okay. And that's how they're compartmentalizing language. So then what happens is when they start to string all these words together into sentences, they're pulling the first word that comes to mind.
Right.
It's the first word. So if they're looking at something that's blue, like they're looking at your shirt and they can't think of the English word for blue, they'll just say, "Oh, look, your Asu shirt." Yeah. That's not language confusion because it's correct. It's a blue shirt. And if you notice, they put it in the English structure.
Right.
So it's still correct. They're just pulling. I got two words and it's the first one that came to me. So I'm just going to grab this one and I'm going to use it. And that's what they're doing. And it's not so much that there's language confusion. When your child does that, it's for you to say, "Oh my God, they have so many choices that this is the one that they chose. Yay!" And you applaud that. Don't reprimand them. Don't chastise them. Just really think about in this moment, there's so many words that they can choose from. And they chose that word over the English word or the Spanish word or whatever language they're in because that's the one that came to them first. So if they're speaking to you in English and they use a Spanish word, that means the Spanish is coming. Some of those Spanish words are coming to them first.
Yes.
If they're speaking to you in Spanish and they use the English word, they can't remember the Spanish word for that. So let me make sure that I'm using it more. It's your cue as to what it is that you need to do in order to help their brain compartmentalize a little bit more.
Yes. Mm-hmm. It's so true. So true. And tell our parents why it's so important for the kids to learn, to start young.
Well, the reason why we suggest that we start at a younger age is because in terms of like language development for the brain, it makes the most sense where it's still like our brain is still a sponge when it comes to vocabulary. We're learning new words every day. We're learning sentence structure every day just in the conversations that we're having with people. So the younger we are, it's better because we're in the process of learning. That's not to say that we can't do it as adults. It's just that once we're adults, we're so stuck on the rules that we forget to be open to the changes. Right. And that's what makes it hard. What makes it hard is not that we don't understand or can't get it. What makes it hard is we're stuck on the rules. We're stuck. Mm-hmm. But in English, it's supposed to go like this. Mm-hmm. And we have a hard time reminding our brain that it's okay because other languages do different things.
Right. So I hope parents, as you're listening, that you unstick your brain from... and understand that, unstick your brain. That's not even correct English.
I tell my clients, it's like, give yourself grace. Just give yourself grace. Like, if you're learning a new language, okay, yes, I'm 45, I've got degrees, and I'm learning French. I am not expecting to speak in French the way that I speak in English because I've been doing that for 45 years. I've only been doing French for 10. So I have to remember that when I speak French, I sound like a 10-year-old. So what linguistically is supposed to happen at 10, okay, yeah, we have a command of tenses. We know how to use them. We make errors here. We don't really have the abstract nuances. These are all things that you have to remind yourself. When I was 10, how did I speak English? Oh, okay. So now that I'm in this new language, if I've been learning this language for 10 years, that's about how I'm going to sound. I feel like I'm more college educated in my Spanish now because I've been doing it for over 20 years.
Right.
So essentially, I'm finally at that college age where I can start doing other things. I can write whole academic papers in Spanish because I feel more comfortable with it. Wow. So years ago, I probably wouldn't have, though. I would have to have, can you check this and make sure I mean what's going on? I don't think I have the nuances, but now that I feel more comfortable with being able to have that higher level order of thinking in the language, so I can do it and not even worry about it, and I can edit and revise my own work. Right. Whereas someone who might have been studying Spanish for 5 years that's going to try to do that, get somebody else to edit and revise your work.
I learned Spanish. I did French all the way up to high school. And then I came here and I was talking to my patients. And then I hear myself speaking French in place of Spanish. And I'm like, what am I doing?
Because the French is what you know.
Exactly.
So, and I don't do it. I'm speaking enough French to get me to somebody that speaks Spanish. I did it in Italy. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it until my French gets better. But it's whatever it is that we're used to. Whatever our brain, again, goes back to the brain. Our brain knows. Okay, yeah, I know that I have English and I have French and I have whatever other languages I might have. So and I hear another language. Doesn't sound like English, doesn't really sound like this other language. It sounds close to French. So let me just pull out French and see what happens.
Exactly.
That's what the brain does.
Yeah, and because French and Spanish have the same Latin roots, so they kind of sound the same. So I'm always speaking.
Right, but there's no accent grave, no accent aigu in Spanish, okay? It's just one accent, that's all you have. Solamente un acento, no más.
Okay, fine, no más. Okay, got it. So I love it. So can you tell us about the program that you run, like teaching? How do you teach families and kids and the parents? How do you teach them to be more comfortable with the language?
So I really do focus on the parent. I think it's really important because, again, that whole idea of modeling is really important. And I picked it up because I noticed, because I have 3 boys and 1 girl, right? And I'm watching them as I'm doing just only Spanish with them at home, and I'm doing all the different things. I was getting frustrated with, why do these boys only speak to me in English when I'm giving them all of these lessons in Spanish, and I'm saying all this stuff? They understand me, they know what to say, but they just keep speaking in English. And then I had to look and I said, oh, their dad is speaking in English. And in their mind, boy, that boy does this, so this boy does this too. So when I had my daughter, and she was using more Spanish than they were, I said, there it is. It's the modeling. So long as your child sees you doing it, it compels them to, 1, be able to say, okay, this is 2 separate things. I know how to compartmentalize. And 2, it gives them that model to strive for. Oh, mommy's speaking Spanish, daddy's speaking Spanish. I want to do that too. So let me just model what I see. As opposed to what we did when we were growing up, it was you go to school, you take these language classes, and you come home and you practice with who?
Yourself.
Right. So then you don't really see the value and the benefit, because you're like, I can't talk to anybody. I'm at home. I got this homework. I got this question. I can't ask my mom. I can't ask my dad. I can't ask anybody. Nobody in this house can answer this question for me. I have to fend for myself. Why am I even here? And these are the inner conversations that we have around language, which is why so many of us don't retain it, because if you look at it and like, okay, so who in your family speaks this language that you're trying to learn? Who do you have around you that's helping you to be able to walk through your processing? Who do you have? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a parent per se. Even if you had like an aunt or a godmother or somebody who can at least walk you through how you're processing language. It's not just, I need this person to practice with. If you also need that person that's going to do that gentle correction. No, not yo eres, it's yo soy. Oh, yo soy. Okay, you need to hear that too, because that's what we got in English. Yeah. I be, I am. Oh, I am. We get that same type of correction, and you need to have that with somebody around you too. And that's how the kids are able to get it, because they see you doing with them in that language what they're used to. Too.
Right. Oh, that's so important, as with everything else in life, right?
Right.
We parents lead the charge, and then the kids follow.
Right. And that's exactly what it is. Like, they know how to wash dishes because they watched us do it, and we told them when they were right or wrong, right? Same thing with language. Right. Same thing. They'll know how to use it because they've seen us doing it. They know how to nuance it because they've watched us do it. Like, my children have this term that I use called language swag. And the way that my children speak Spanish, I can hear their swag sometimes, or I can see them owning the language. And the reason why they do that is because they see me do it. Right. They see me do it. I'm not always using proper Spanish with them when I speak, because when they go out into the real world, not everybody is going to use proper Spanish in every conversation. So they hear the bits and pieces of, I guess, what would you call it, hood Spanish? I don't know. They get bits and pieces of that so that they can, and so then they're able to kind of weave that into how they speak Spanish, and it helps them to be able to take ownership of it too.
Right. Woohoo! Can you give us an example?
Mm-hmm. So there's this phrase that's used, like, don't you do that again. That's in Spanish. It's para nada. Para nada is the correct way to say it. Usually when I tell my kids if I want them to stop doing something immediately, it's a pana. I take off that RA, I take off that DA, and then no lo haga pana. Don't you, stop. Don't do that. And I don't ever want to see you do it again. Instead of saying, no lo hagas para nada.
It's run along.
It's the same thing, but it doesn't sound like me. So they have to be able to get used to hearing my voice in both languages, because that's the other thing. That's the other trap that we find ourselves falling into too, is we're so busy trying to say it right that we forget to add our essence and our soul to it while we're speaking.
Right, because there's a difference between saying that whole long sentence and the short stop it. Stop it.
Right.
They're like, no, mommy is serious.
Mm-hmm. There's a difference between, oh, sweetheart, please don't do that. Or stop that right now. The urgency is different, and you got to be able to do it in both languages. It can't just be. It's a funny story. I worked at a camp for all of these differently hearing students when I was in high school, and I didn't know ASL. I only knew the letters, and I had this. I would try to tell them I'm spelling out everything, and they're looking at me. They're like, "Oh, you don't really know this," so they would just turn their head, because if they turn their head, they can't see what I'm signing to them, so technically they can't hear what I'm saying. And it's the same sort of thing. You've got to be able to know what needs to be said in that moment, so that they're listening and they're following directions immediately, and don't take too much time, because they're going to tune out.
Exactly. Selective hearing.
Yes, exactly.
So cool. So give our parents and our kids listening, what are some practical reasons why we need to learn a second language? Why it's important, not just for our brains, but what else is it?
Well, one of the things that I teach, because I work with Black families primarily, though that's my focus. And one of the things that I press upon them is this idea of not everybody that looks like us speaks like us. So if you have Spanish, you just opened up a world to millions more Black people that you didn't have access to before. And being able to understand the nuances that come with that. So there are ways in which, in learning Spanish, if you're learning it in a way that centers that Black experience, you're learning what some of the similarities are, what some of the shared instances, like even this whole thing of no lo hagas pa nada, like we do that in English. So being able to see that distinction that we can also latch onto, being able to look at another person and saying, oh my gosh, I can connect to you on this level, and I also have your language. I'm not forcing you to feel uncomfortable. I'm not forcing myself to feel uncomfortable, because we've got this breadth of vocabulary that we can now use. Right. And you'll find that in some languages, it's easier to talk about who you are and your identity. It's difficult. Race in English is awkward and guilt-laden. It's just guilt-laden. And you say Black, and it just, whether you're proud about it or not, just the sound of the word brings all these guilt memories to whoever is listening to it. But if you were talking about race in Spanish, it's gonna be something different. The tone, the tonality of the words that you associate with race, they're all gonna look and feel different. And it even makes it, sometimes I might even make it feel easier for you. There's a difference between, my Blackness versus negritude, right? There's a different feel. They both mean the same thing. But hearing the French version of it, you're like, oh, okay. And it resonates a little bit differently, right?
Right. Oh, isn't that amazing? Perception, the brain perceives words. Yeah, that's so amazing. Yeah. You know what? Everybody, you should sign up for Dr. Kami's class. I and my kids are taking it because
yes!
together. And
it is
so exciting. The reason I was so excited when I heard about her program was because I was like, oh my goodness, that's something me and the kids can do together. And it doesn't take that much time. And we are learning together. We can correct each other, and they can see mommy makes mistakes too. Mommy doesn't know everything.
Right. And it's really, and especially with the way they work with things, one of the places where we kind of start is those things that we use every day. Instructions, right? We're always telling our child to do something, right? Don't pick up your stuff, eat your food, don't do that. So you start with those things that you know you're going to repeat anyway, and then you just build from there. And the more you're building, you get to add certain things like, oh, by the way, I'm a medical doctor. Oh, well, let me give you some medical terms in Spanish so that you can start using these with your patients. You're going to say this instead of this, or this is how you say, hey, I'm learning Spanish, but let's not talk in Spanish right now in order to make sure that they feel comfortable so that they know, because that also builds rapport, right? When you see somebody trying to meet you where you are, it changes the scope of your relationship with folks too.
Right.
So it's not just about the bonding with the kids, it's how you're able to apply it and then be able to deepen even other relationships in other places.
Right. And the travel. I love that.
Yes, the travel. Yes.
So tell our listeners a little bit about your travel, the travel part of your program.
Yes. So every year I take families to Guatemala, and everybody says, why are you taking us to Guatemala and why are you not taking us somewhere else? One, because for me, Guatemala is the safest in terms of being able to move freely without having to worry about any danger coming to you. That's the first thing. The other thing is, in terms of new Spanish learners, the way that they speak it is a way that is going to be able to help you to be able to follow along with the speed, but not be so disjointed or so contraction with all these contractions and this, that, and the other, that it makes it harder for you to understand, right? So those are the two reasons why I choose Guatemala. We go to Guatemala and I basically let the families run it. It's like, okay, so today, the Johnsons are going to be responsible for getting us to the Palacio. All right, so let us know what's first.
Love it.
And they'll look and say, well, we have to take a taxi. Okay, well, ask the hotel person that they can send a taxi for all of us. How many people are here, so tell them what you need a taxi for. And kind of forcing them to do those everyday activities in the language, but also taking ownership of stuff, because it helps you out a lot. You ask the hotel concierge 3 times how to get a taxi, you're gonna know by that 4th time exactly, right? And you don't necessarily need me. So if I can teach you how to do it at least twice, then that means that you and your family can go off and explore the city by getting a taxi on your own. All of these different things. So it helps to make sure that folks are kind of aware of just their surroundings through language.
Right.
And allowing them to be able to explore.
Looking forward to it.
Yes.
Yes. So tell us how we can find you, please.
You can find me on all things Bilingual Brown Babies. So my website, bilingualbrownbabies.com. On IG, I'm Bilingual Brown Babies. You can, I have my own personal network that's on the Mighty Networks, and you look up Bilingual Brown Babies, and I'm there. All things Bilingual Brown Babies, you will find me. If my SEO did what it was supposed to do, as soon as you put in Bilingual Brown, it should pop right up. So that you can be able to find me and have access to me.
Well, oh, this has been so yummy. So I hope you parents, you take advantage of Dr. Kami's services, and I hope you've understood the importance of why language is so critical for your brain function for both parents and kids. So it's been my pleasure. Hope to see you next episode. Thank you again, Dr. Kami, for coming on.
Of course.
Okay, take care, everyone. Bye.